And this is called Unplugged, so we just assume that meant we can talk about whatever the hell we want. Is that correct? Cool. And I think what came to us both was we wanted to talk about magic. And life, or the magic of life. And a brief, I mean, I've spoken about my life tons of times, but very briefly, just want to give you some idea of my life before waking up to what Sydney Banks was pointing us towards. I spent a lot of time with depression, spent time on drugs, drink. I've been a very violent man, and I have been sent to prison for violence. I suffered a great deal in my life. I was a very scared human being that carried this ego of a hard man. Went to the gym, built myself up, and I spent my life with a great deal of fear, and I did everything I could to try and prevent the outside world from scaring me. And all too often that included me confronting the outside world people first. And it often didn't turn out too well for anybody. Life wasn't particular. I endured life. So I heard somebody say, no, it was at the retreat, sorry, somebody said that they were enduring life. And that was me, I endured life. It got to the point when my marriage broke down and I ended up homeless. So I ended up living with a customer for, I think it was 4 or 5 months, 6 months. But it was in this time of this breakdown that miracles started to happen. And when I say miracles, I call them miracles, because it was things beyond my rational thinking that I couldn't explain were happening. And I had some deep spiritual experiences happen in those times. But I think perhaps the most useful of these experiences came after being introduced to the principles and then listening to Sydney Banks. And I remember going for a walk. I failed my college course in ecology. I did an HND in ecology, and I failed my college course in ecology. But I've always had this passion for the natural world and for nature. I love nature. I've always been fascinated by it. And it was after listening to Sid that it was actually probably the lowest time of my life, or very close to one of the lowest times of my life. I went for a walk, and running up to this, the last few weeks running up to this time, I was planning committing suicide. I'd completely had enough. I was like, this is it, I'm out of here. I was looking for somewhere where my family wouldn't go to that would be tainted. And I was trying to keep it so that I could minimize damage. But thankfully that never came. I listened to Sid Banks on YouTube. There isn't much on YouTube, but I listened to him after getting a bit of an ass kicking off the lady who introduced me to it, because she said I was lazy. She's very observant. And she said, you've never listened to Sid, you've never bought The Enlightened Gardener, you've never done anything that I asked you to do. It's like, no, you're absolutely right. So I took some time off work. I was dressed in my tree surgery stuff, because I've been a tree surgeon for 16 years. And when I went for this walk, there was something different. There was something in something that Sid said that was like very different for me. And I live in the Lake District, as Sue just said, and I went for a walk at one of the fells. Fell is a mountain in the Lake District. It's a hill. And I was stood on the side of this hill, and as I was stood on the side of this hill, I was just watching. I had a head and a heart full of something, and I couldn't figure any of it out. But where my insight seemed to come from with regards to what Sid was pointing to was from a jackdaw. Now a jackdaw in the UK is a small crow. It's got a grey head and it's got these beautiful blue eyes. And it flew past. And as it flew past, it turned and looked at me. And it was something and nothing. To anybody else, or to me in fact, it was nothing. But in that moment, it was everything that Sid was pointing to. This jackdaw was consciousness. This jackdaw was aware of my presence on its landscape. It flew, it was a regular there, that's its home. And it knew there was something different on its landscape, that's why it looked at me. And in order for it to acknowledge that fact that I am there, and oh, what is that? That posed that question to itself, what is it? It has the power of thought. It knew where it was going. It knew where it was coming from. It knew what it was doing. And it was something that I'd never considered in my life, was this power of thought. This power of thought. This universal power of thought that Sydney Banks was talking about. The moment I saw the power of thought in this crow, the power of consciousness in this crow, this is me completely putting words to an insight that was completely wordless. There was no, this is stuff that has occurred to me to explain it afterwards. But what I'd say about it was the moment I recognized the power of thought and consciousness in the crow, bang, it hit me. That's what I am. That crow is the same stuff as me. Consciousness is a universal power that is orientating the leaves on those banana trees towards the sun. They have awareness. And in seeing that, my own personal experience, I woke up to God. And I was not a God person, but I woke up to God. And God to me wasn't a human being, it wasn't a him. God was this constant energy, this creative power that created everything. That includes us. Humanity seems to have got itself this massive ego where it thinks it's somewhere at the top of something, it's top of the food chain, top of the animals, top of the plants. We bully the hell out of the natural world because we think we're separate. And there was no separation. There was absolutely no separation. And in that moment, every single bit of suffering I was experiencing vanished. In finding that moment, in finding God in that moment, every single bit of suffering vanished. It wasn't something, I've been to therapists and counsellors and I've been on medication and been diagnosed with X, Y, and Z. But all that disappeared. I was told I would struggle my way through life, find ways to cope, but it all disappeared in that moment. And what I was told was absolutely 100% false. There was nothing wrong with me. I was working beautifully given thought that was occurring to me up until that moment of my life. I suddenly found a magic. I suddenly found life is this magic. And we had the most beautiful conversation last night. Gab, I think we're only supposed to be 10 minutes, but it turned out about 2 hours. It was lovely, wasn't it?
Magic. We were talking about this magician. What's his name, Jenny? David Blaine. Do you know him? So he does this incredible magic, you know, and he levitates. And I was, I'll share this with you. I saw that he levitated. And so I thought, well, maybe I can levitate too. So I figured that I could go in the shower and levitate, you know. So I was practicing my levitation. And I caught myself actually raising my arms, you know. I was like, this is not levitation, Gav. So they were, you know, if you've never seen him, I invite you to see him, but they were interviewing him and somebody had asked him about developing a children's show. And he said, why would I do that? Children are able to see the magic in life. The reason why I do these shows for adults is because that's just not so obvious for adults. And so I was sharing with Dave my love for my garden and how, you know, I have a fig tree and I have a cherry tree. And this year I am noticing that I'm able to go into the garden and really pay attention. I'm able to really see when the trees go from winter to the spring, and if you look at them, they'll start swelling in certain parts. They'll be budding, and then boom, there is a leaf or a flower or a fig. I have these plants that in the winter they kind of start turning towards the sun. You know, they kind of just go like this. There's a technical name for that. So, for me, it's been a joy to develop eyes for the magic of life, for the magic of my body, healing, for the magic of me thinking a certain way, and then all of a sudden, a moment later, I see life completely differently. You know, I can be upset at somebody for years, even after the principles. You know, and I'm like, it's just thinking, blah, 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 you know, like I talk to myself, and then all of a sudden I see them, and I see just love, you know, and they're sweet. And I'm like, what happened to that anger, you know? What's that all about? So the principles in action, or God in action, in everything, you know, in the trees, in me, in my psychology, in my biology, in our ecology, and just this ability to see the formless take form, whether it's a child, whether it's my flowers, whether it's the capacity that we have to notice that we're not broken, to notice that there's no healing to be done because there's no injury to our soul, to our spirit. And so this, I think, for you and I, as we were talking yesterday, it's been a journey of discovery, of seeing the principles in everything, not only our own mental health and physical health, but truly the universe at large. And I was hearing somebody was talking about love. Lisa and Amanda were talking about love, and that not like a personal love or a romantic love or the love that you have for your pet or your child or your husband or wife, but the love that powers that. And as I was listening to you guys, I just kind of got the sense of the invisible energy that powers us all. And so as I have moments of seeing that, I do want to be gentle with my ecology, you know? I do want to be gentle with the cashier that's having a bad day. And life in those moments feels magical, feels gentle, feels caring, feels hopeful.
I think I found everything I was looking for when I stopped looking for it in myself. When I stopped this continual, how the hell am I doing? Why am I doing? Me. This self-centered thing that was getting in the way of everything I was looking for. And it turns out that for me, I found so much magic in myself by observing. Not me, not myself, but by observing the natural world, like truly looking and then noticing. Because it's interesting, when you are noticing a film, for example, a movie, you don't notice depression if you have depression. It doesn't exist in those moments. It's not there. Magically, it's disappeared. We are aware of thought. And it's been, since waking, like I say, I failed my HND in ecology, something I was quite good at. But coming across this has given me far more value to my understanding of ecology, the natural world. And I just want to share a couple of insights that have come to me that I think kind of are pointing to God. And like I said, I've been a tree surgeon. I have cut many trees. I've stopped now. I stopped when I realized that trees are consciousness. They are living. They are organisms. They communicate. They have a sense of self, ego. They have ego. And the reason why I say this is because if you have two trees growing alongside each other, Gab, can you hold that? Mm-hmm. If you have two trees growing alongside each other like that, very close, if you fell out one tree, you are left with a tree that has no branches coming over into this side. Mm-hmm. It is aware of its next door neighbour. It is aware of other. It's aware of self. Cheers, Gab. Mm-hmm. And if you walk through a woodland and you look up, what looks like a tangled mess of branches isn't. It's an organised structure where branches very, very, very rarely touch. It has awareness of other branches, other trees. Each tree has its own awareness. They think. And as I said yesterday, I read in a magazine, one of my forestry magazines, we know that trees think, but we don't know how because they do not have a brain. And that, to me, is where Western science is, until it wakes up that thought is not a product of the brain, but a principle of life, a universal principle of life, then it will always be confused by that point. But as I was working one day, when I've spent a lot of time pulling thorns out of my hand, and out of all parts, I've had in arteries, I've been bleeding like hell from them. But I remember one day I was pulling this one thorn out of my hand, and I had a different thought about this. It wasn't one of annoyance, it was one of query. It was like, why do trees, plants, create thorns? Why do they create a thorn? It was like, well, it's obvious, it's for protection. It's to protect it from predation, to protect it from damage. And I carried on pondering it. how does it work? How does this thorn work on a cactus, thistle, hawthorn, holly? Nettles have stingy barbs. How do they work? Well, they only work because of something else. And this other something else is vital, because without it, there is absolutely no point in a thorn. And this other something else is a nervous system. A nervous system that animals possess. And when I realised that, I thought, wow, that's interesting, because plants and trees don't have nervous systems like what animals do. That's really fascinating. So how the hell does a plant know about an animal nervous system? It's in a totally different kingdom. A tree or a plant is in the plant kingdom. Animals are in the animal kingdom. Different kingdoms. How does the tree know to grow a thorn? How does the tree know about the nervous system? And again, I pondered it and I pondered it and I pondered it until one day it just hit me. The tree didn't know. The tree doesn't need to know about the nervous system. In the same way, I don't need to know how to grow my nervous system. The tree doesn't need to know about the thorn. In the same way, I don't need to know how to grow my hair, to beat my heart. There is a knowledge that has created everything. And this knowledge created the thorn, and it created the nervous system. It knew. It knows. In the same way, leaves, like I've just pointed to, they work like big solar panels. They take in light from the sun via chlorophyll and convert it into sugar for energy. That leaf has never touched the sun. The sun is a heavenly body suspended in space. We are a planet which orbits this ball of burning gas. Yet organisms on planet Earth have an awareness of this burning ball of gas held out in space. How does the plant know about the sun when the sun has never even touched the planet Earth? It's not connected physically. But just because they're not connected physically does not mean they are not connected via knowledge. And this knowledge that creates organisms that can utilize a star's energy is the same knowledge that created us. And it does not make mistakes. It creates perfection. It is perfect. Everything is perfect. The only times when life isn't perfect is when we think it's not perfect. It's really, really simple. And I'm so thankful that it is that simple. Because if we were living in an imperfect world, or we were imperfect, then that would be a very difficult thing to overcome. But to know that all we're up against is the power of thought. And when I say all we're up against, I'm not decrying thought, because thought is the same thing that built the plant. It's God. In the Bible, it said God is creation. The reality that we experience is a creation of thought. There's magic in that. There's magic right in that flower, right in that leaf. There's magic in every single thought. There's magic in the sun. There's magic in us. Everything is one massive unknown. I haven't got a clue how any of this works. But just getting glimpses into the magic of what is actually happening, what is truly happening, seems to allow me to find more and more freedom in my life, just to go out and live and be fascinated by life, be fascinated by people, be fascinated by myself. It's a gift.
It's a gift.
It's a gift.
So I think it was in September that we were teaching together. We were at a retreat in Santa Ynez, California, and we were hosted by a lovely lady that had this really nice home, and she invited her brother. And her brother's a scientist. And he said to me, he's like a few degrees, advanced degrees, like PhDs, kind of like him. And he said something to me that really shook me. He said, "The science of today will be the mythology of tomorrow." I had never heard that. A few people are.
No, I'm nodding because I like it.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. And so that was interesting, because when I was going to college, what we thought about even at a physical level about the brain, there was a certain knowledge, and now we know that knowledge is just really not true, right? Like the brain has this capacity for plasticity and create new connections, etc. And so then everything that I give for a fact today is just an illusion of the moment. And so I remembered, I don't know if you saw it a while back on YouTube, there was this video of a lioness that was taking care of a little deer, right? And I think she had lost her own cub. And this lioness was taking care of this deer like there was no tomorrow. I mean, she would not leave him. To the point, I think, where she was in the way to a starvation. But she was there. And so I would have said, that they were natural enemies, right? Like a lion and a deer. I would have thought that was a fact. And yet, it was not. There was this capacity for the lioness, I guess, to see even her own biology, right? And her own genealogy. And to transcend that in the moment and to connect to this little deer. And that's also true for us. There was a woman here yesterday, her name is Laura, and Laura was, I don't know if I have her permission. Laura, I hope I have your permission. And she's okay?
We won't say anything.
Yeah, okay, she's fine, yeah, between you and I. She was diagnosed with cancer, and we were talking to her, and she said, well, I am not only my body, I am more than my body. And so I love this avenue when we start noticing the things that we're given for a fact, and then all of a sudden we realize, oh, this is not a fact, and this can change. And the capacity of the principles or God or creation to be continuously coming up with new forms, with new possibilities. So, if it can happen for a deer and a lioness, it just can happen anywhere for all of us. Everything that we give for a fact, as far as our psychology, and the way that we think we are, and our capacity to create this self-image. And we say to ourselves, yeah, we are dancers, or we are singers, or we're not dancers, or we're not singers. And I'm gonna use an example of somebody here. I will not say his name, but you know who you are. Not you.
Does it matter?
No. But I was talking to this one person, and I said, hey, would you like to go dancing? And they said, no, I'm not a dancer.
Oh yeah, that'd be me.
Oh, really? And I was like, what do you mean? And so this person closed their eyes and just put his hands up like this. both like this. And then I close my eyes, and then I touch his hands. And this non-dancer and I danced for a whole song. There were chairs around us, there were tables around us, and we didn't hit anything. And it was a kind of a magical experience for me, because the only thing that I could feel was the connection to a soulmate by his hands. So I opened my eyes and I said, I thought you were not a dancer. You know? And so I have so many of those too. You know, I am this and I am not that, and this is what I do well and this is what I don't do well. And so part of the magic of seeing this at work more and more is it just expands my horizons. You know, it just kind of, sometimes I feel Gabriela is like in a solid line. And when I see this, it's like there's no solid line there. There's just infiniteness. And then we touch the natural world. And I, you know, like when I have those moments, I just don't feel my beginning and their beginning, you know, it's just like endless. That happened to me with Jan. I think Jan and I, we were listening to somebody, and I just felt like I wanted to sit close to her. And she held my hand, and we were holding hands. And at one point, I couldn't figure out where my hand ended and hers began. And I just met Jan this year.
I love animals, I love plants. I love your deer and your lion. Mm-hmm. And I think there's always been this saying that don't put human emotions on animals. You shouldn't put human emotions on animals. And to me, that is one of the most stupid things any human being could say.
I don't know what chippy is.
People say...
I don't know what chippy is.
Eh?
Chippy.
Chippy?
Go on. Go on. No.
What do you mean?
I didn't understand. No, go on.
It's English. It's English.
It's English, yeah, sorry. English is my second language.
I'm only joking. But people say don't put human emotions on animals. Mm-hmm. And it's like, as you spoke about that deer and that lion, what was coming to me was love. Mm. You know, we think that animals are working on instinct, and I've had this said to me so many, well, animals work on instinct. I'm like, what's instinct? What is instinct? Well, instinct's thought that we don't understand. So you could say that a whale instinctively swims from the southern hemisphere to the northern hemisphere. It knows to do it, or swallows instinctively know when to leave for the South Africa. But the actual execution of each of those migrations is done with conscious thought. Right, I'm thirsty now, I need a drink. I need to rest. I'm hungry, I'll go over there. I'm going to go here, I'm going to rest there. Where am I going to... You know, we don't understand this power of thought. And one of the things that really hit me when I was waking up to the principles, and when I was having this moment with this jackdaw, is we do not use thought wisely. We do not use it properly. There is power within thought that we have absolutely no awareness of. The moment we think we know what thought is, we've completely and utterly missed the point. And as you spoke about that lion and that deer, what was coming to me was love. And I watched my dog. Now, people would say to me, oh, dogs just work on instinct. Human beings work on thought. But my dog is a very emotional being.
I know, my cat is too, yeah.
He's very emotional. I mean, he can go from naught to pissed off in 0.1 of a second. and then calm down again. Do you know what I mean? He's like, he's mental. He's a Jack Russell, he's about yay big, and he thinks he's a Great Dane. But just observing Rusty, he is loving, he loves, he's kind, he's compassionate. He doesn't share, but he's kind. And he's angry and he's scared. He feels. He feels. And this idea that don't put feelings onto animals has really served humanity, because it's meant that we can just destroy at our will when we have separated ourselves, forgetting that we are an animal. We are an animal. We're not something different to the dog. We are an organism born of this earth that humanity did not create. And this too applies to trees. When they did studies on the photosynthesis rates on beech trees, if you have one large beech tree that is occupying the majority of the light and smaller beech trees around it, they naturally assume that, well, the tree that would be getting the most photosynthesis, the most energy, would be the larger tree. It's got more leaves, so that naturally that would be the case. More leaves equals more photosynthesis. Smaller trees suppressed, dominated by this bigger tree. Domination. And I think that's something that is spoken about an awful lot, about how survival of the fittest and all this stuff. We have these ideas about the natural world, how it's an aggressive place, a dangerous place, out for itself. But when they measured the rate of photosynthesis among the smaller trees, they realized they were photosynthesizing at the same rate. They had the same amount of sugar as the big tree. When they really looked into it, what they found was the large beech tree was giving the smaller trees nutrients. It was giving it sugar. It was giving its sugar away to help the other ones come through. That right there is love in plant form. These principles apply to every single living organism on the planet. And the reason why I speak about this, and I'm not talking about how I'm doing, is because the most useful thing I realized was to stop focusing on myself. If I go looking for something wrong in myself, pretty sharpish, I'm going to find something. Doesn't mean it's there, but I'll make something up. But to start to get an insight into God, okay, these are God principles. As much as they're psychological principles, they're spiritual God principles, because they're both the same thing. You cannot hold thought. You cannot weigh thought. You cannot cut thought. You cannot find thought. You cannot destroy thought. You cannot stop thought. Same for consciousness. Same for mind. You can't destroy thought. It doesn't exist within the realms of what we comprehend. But it exists. This stuff exists beyond our sensory and mechanical observations. But we experience it. So we all know it's there. This is universal magic. This is God magic.
Learning to see, that's been the journey of this year for me. Just learning to see. You know, learning to notice more. Like in the spring, my cherry tree, the cherry tree is a tree that loses its leaves in the winter where I live. And right around, like a little before spring, as I told you before, it starts swelling in a couple of areas in the branches. Well, if you like go really quickly, you can miss it. I can miss it. But as I've slowed down in my garden a little bit, I just noticed all the different kinds of life to be born soon, you know? It's like, oh, there comes the leaf, there's gonna come the fig, there's gonna come by flowers, like I can just see it. And so I've just noticed how much I'm seeing this year. And the only thing that's happening is really, I have invited myself to pay attention. You know, pay attention. There was a kid here yesterday. I don't know if you saw him, David. He was like 5 years old. He was so cute. You know, he had his sister with him. And I asked him, do you like chocolate croissants? And he goes, yes. So we went out there. He got one. And then he said, and one for my little sister. You know. Do we need to teach each other compassion, or is compassion just naturally in all of us? You know, do we need to teach kids to share, or do they naturally know how to do that? Do we know how to do that? Do we need to worry about our grounding, or can you just observe God in the moment? And so, when I'm able to notice, I just feel enveloped by the universe. And it doesn't matter that my mom drank, it doesn't matter that my dad got murdered, it doesn't matter that I was a migrant, it doesn't matter that I got upset with my husband, it doesn't matter, you know, like all those things that in one moment seem so important to me, like a magic trick, in the next, they're gone. They're just gone. So these universal principles that are alive and well in everything, always, they're magical. They really are, like, in awe. You know, when I'm able to observe them, I go like, oh my gosh. I was with somebody in the middle of a schizophrenic attack, I guess. I don't know. What do you call it? Schizophrenic episode. That's what it is. Psychosis? Okay, thank you. Psychosis. And so he was talking and talking and talking and talking, and he had learned about the principles, and I was just like, what do I do? He talked straight for an hour. And I don't know if you've ever been with somebody like that, but you know, they talk about, you know, Martians and this and that, and waves and all this stuff. And I just didn't know what to do, and I was going to try to say something, but then I just couldn't because he was talking really quickly. And then finally he took like a moment to breathe after like 45 minutes to an hour, and I said, is there anything that I can do to help you right now? And he said to me, well, you can interrupt me so I can stop talking about these things. You know, like he's in the middle of this, what we would call psychosis, right? But he had this great awareness of what would be helpful to him. Learning to see, you know, because I thought, like, before he told me that, so like, oh, well, something serious needs to be done here because it looks serious to me. But he was like so clear about what was helpful to him, you know? So One moment, I'm thinking this is something very serious. I don't know what to do. Should I call 911? You know, should I call Dr. Pettit? You know, he's a psychiatrist, he should know. And then the next moment, it's like, gosh, so simple, huh? We have like 10 minutes. Maybe 5.
There's something in what you spoke about just then, Gab, which was something that was actually occurring to me to talk about as well, which is something we spoke about last night. I mentioned this too in a small group yesterday about a lad who's been coming to our group in Kendal. And I hadn't seen this lad for, I think it was 20 years. When I was working in Kendal, helping my dad put up an awning over a shop, and I recognised this lad called Nick. And I said, Nick, how are you doing? He was like, who are you? And his missus went, Claire, she said, it's Dave Ellery. The Brummies, by the way. And he said, bloody hell, you've changed. Where's all your hair gone? Because he used to have hair down to it. Like the right pillar. And he said, you do this thing, don't you? Does it work? I said, what do you mean? Does it work? I said, well, I don't know if work's really the right word. I said, some people can come and they can hear something, they can start to live a bit of a freer life. I'm coming. And I never thought he'd come.
Mm.
When he came, he told me that he'd locked himself in his bedroom for 10 years, painted it black, shut the curtains and not left the house. And this one time he happened to stumble across me in the street was a time his missus had dragged him out to get another prescription drugs for his mental suffering. And he came to a group with Jen and I, and he heard something. And the next day he came up and he said, do you know what day it is? I haven't got a clue. It's the 10th of September. Do you know why that's important? No, I haven't got a clue. It's the day my mother died. Was it 10 years ago? Say 10 years ago. He said, but ever since then, on this day and running up to it, I've really struggled. He said, but I'm all right today. He said, do you know what else? I've let the kids, this was at Christmas, wasn't it? I've let the kids have a Christmas tree for the first time in X 5 years. And all this stuff he was saying. And then he sent me this beautiful text the other day saying, you're my hero, Dave. I've gone out, I've got myself my first job in 20 years. He said, my life's great. I lived the most fantastic life. I'm back together with my family. And it's all down to you. I said, Nick, that's fascinating. I said, because we haven't once spoken about the Christmas tree. We haven't once spoken about leaving the house. We haven't once spoken about going to get a job. We haven't spoken about this, that, all this stuff he was reeling off. I said, that's not come from me, mate. You've done that. Mm. And I think it kind of reminded me of a time when I woke up to these, when I woke up to the principles, I found this magic, this fantastic, infinite potential that life is not what I think it is. It's not what I think it is. And as I got more and more fascinated by that, I started to listen to other people. And I started to trust in these people, and the magic disappeared. I lost the magic because I believed that somebody who had been around these principles longer than me knew something better than me. And I believed them. And I remember for about 18 months I lost this magic. And it was so sad. It was heartbreaking for me. I really struggled with it. But it was halfway up a Via Ferrata in Switzerland. Of all the places to be really paying attention, I was just getting bombarded by insight. It was like, You condense the principles down to thoughts creates feelings. You believe that's all the principles were pointing to because you trusted that somebody knew greater than you. And when I realised that, I felt this magic start to come back. And what I've realised is that for my life, I am the wisest person. I know everything I need to know, and if I don't know it, the potential is there for me to realise it. And this applies to every single living organism. We are all the most powerful things. We're all equal. There is nobody who knows more than the next. There is nobody with the potential. Everybody has the potential to wake up and see something so deep. I love that. And I love that the moment you start to see it, you realise it's just the beginning. It's not the destination, it's not the goal. It's just a beginning.
And that's sort of what happened to Sid, isn't it? Somebody said something, but what he heard came from him, not from him, but, from God.
Through him.
Through him. That's what happened. And so every moment, because we are the principles in action, right? The guide is, the compass is here, through us. I remember the first time that I heard Sid said, "Don't be a follower."
Sorry. I meant to throw it over there.
I like the possibility of really having a realization that comes through me, hearing the whispers of God in my own ears, in my own soul. And I have loved listening to many of you because it's just so different from how I would say it, and it's just so awesome. It's just so beautiful. So I know it's almost time.
We made it.
We made it. The magic, the magic of seeing the principles and God and, one and the same in everything, in our psychology, in our biology, in education, in our ecology. The magic of life.